My husband, I'll call him Josh, and I have been together for 6 years, married for 4, and we don't have kids. We have a really healthy and communicative relationship. We're both pretty easygoing and I really love him. He started working at a large accounting firm about 3 years ago, and from what he tells me he loves it there. He's made a lot of friends through his job and he goes out with them for drinks and social events quite often, and I've been totally okay with that. I'm quite introverted, so I've never been interested in meeting his colleagues or work friends, nor have I asked to. I've got my own circle of friends and I'm fine with us having separate friend groups. After what happened yesterday, it only just occurred to me that he has never actually asked me if I'd like to meet any of them, or go to one of his work events. I guess that's important context. Anyway, I'll start with what happened a few months ago, that I had brushed off until now. I was at a bar with some friends for a couple of Friday after work drinks, and a guy approached me. He was there with some friends, too. He looked slightly familiar, but I hadn't met him before. He seemed friendly enough, and he asked me, my name / right? I think I must have just given him a confused look, because he followed up with, I'm Jake, I work with Josh. I realized that I recognized him from some photos on my husband's phone. I don't use social media except for a private Instagram, so I'm not sure if he posted the photos anywhere, but we've got a very trusting relationship, so I look in his photos sometimes. Don't hate me. This is where it gets a bit embarrassing. I'm a bit socially awkward and so I struggled to end the conversation, but he just kept talking at me. I guess he was already a couple of beers deep. But while he was talking, he said something like, it's great that you guys are still so close. I haven't talked to my brother in ages. At the time I was like, huh? But I just assumed he was drunk and not making sense, so I ignored it. He started to get a little flirty, so I turned to my friends and we left shortly after that. I didn't say anything to them about it and it didn't seem like a big deal to me. I also decided not to tell my husband that I had met his coworker Jake. Not to hide it, but because I figured the guy wouldn't even remember talking to me, and I didn't want to make it awkward for Josh at work by telling him his colleague tried to hit on me. I just thought no harm no foul. But, yesterday morning, I was out walking our dog, Monty. He's a cross between a few breeds and has very unique markings. This matters, I promise, and was on my way to my regular cafe, which is in town. I was waiting in line to order, and the guy in front was an older man. He got his coffee and turned around, but stopped and looked at my dog and goes, hello Monty. Monty was super excited to see him, apparently, and so I guess that the guy was another colleague of Josh's, because Josh brings the dog to the office a couple of times a week. I thought it was sweet, to be honest, so I smiled at him and said hi. He introduced himself. I guessed correctly that he was a colleague, but then he said something like, aren't you a good sister, walking his dog for him? I was so confused that I didn't even know how to react at first, so I stumbled on my words and just said it's my dog. I regret it, but I genuinely couldn't bring myself to correct him and say that I'm Josh's wife and not his sister. It was just too awkward, and I just wanted to leave because I think was suddenly dawning on me what might have been going on. He asked me something about sharing a dog, but I was able to escape the conversation by being next in line to order my coffee, and he left. I seriously don't know what to do, because what the fuck? Do I even ask my husband about this? Part of me is assuming or hoping that it's a mistake, that he doesn't talk about me much at work and they assume we are related because we both have brown hair. But the thought that he has been telling his coworkers that I'm his sister, and evidently they have seen what I look like, so they must have seen photos, makes my stomach churn. I don't even know how I would broach the subject with him. I need some help. What would you guys do in this situation? I have only told one friend what happened because it's so weird and embarrassing, and she has jumped straight to time to plot his downfall, because she's my ride or die, love her, but I don't want to immediately assume the worst or ruin my marriage over something that could be nothing. I'm sorry for the long and rambly post, but I would really appreciate any and all advice. First thing I just want to clear up, I've seen a lot of people suggesting I have crippling social anxiety, or am severely introverted, which I suppose you could glean from the way I explained what happened, but I'm not. I meant that I'm slightly introverted in that I'm not the most eager to meet lots of new people at once, especially a bunch of finance brothers whose weekends consist of unending sports bar beers, where I assume I would be mansplained everything until my ears bleed. Prob a negative assumption, but I'm sure some of you know what I mean. I suppose you could say that I'm confrontation averse and that I'm quite laid back and prefer to keep a conversation easy and positive. I don't like it when things are awkward and correcting when people misrecognize me as one of those things, but I'm not terrified of confrontation. Also, my husband and I do share some mutual friends. I didn't explain that well, but our lives are not entirely separate. The way he acts towards me around our mutual friends is extremely affectionate and normal. It is only his work friends that I have never interacted with. I've also seen some people suggest that what is going on is equivalent to my husband beating me and me hopelessly wondering whether I should break up with him. Or that I'm stupid for thinking my relationship was healthy when it clearly isn't. Like, damn, cut me some slack. I'm a real person and this is an entirely alien and bizarre situation for me. My first reaction wasn't to assume the worst, but I do appreciate that you all have made me certain that it is a big deal. I guess I needed confirmation that the things that happened are enough proof that Josh has been purposefully lying, and they weren't just mix-ups. I'm going to talk to him today, and ask him directly why he's telling his coworkers that I'm his sister. I followed the advice of writing my points down so that they don't get lost if I get emotional, lol. I will do my best not to let him slither out of it, and I hope he has some proof that his colleagues know I'm his wife. I know that's not the theatrical confrontation you guys were hoping for, but it's a Saturday, and I can't wait. Wish me luck, thank you all. I didn't go into much detail about our relationship because it didn't seem relevant, but I meant it when I say we've had the healthiest and best relationship I've ever been in. I was friends with him for a year and a bit before we started dating. We met at uni. I've had shitty relationships before and he truly blew me away when we started dating. He is genuinely the most empathetic, kind, intelligent man I have ever met. He remembers every little thing about me. He's so lovely to me every day and does little acts of service just to make my day better. And I would do anything for him. We are both really supportive of each other. We also have a great sex life, and we are intimate frequently, so I know he's not starved of it or anything. But that's why it's so hard for me to assume the worst, because literally just earlier tonight before he went out he made me dinner and told me he loved me like he always does. Like it just doesn't seem possible or real for him to be living some double life, you know? I can't even imagine it. As I'm typing it feels like I'm in a dream or talking about someone else. Update 1. I'm sorry for the slow update. I know a lot of you were interested in what happened. I actually tried to update on Saturday, but it turns out this subreddit doesn't allow me to post an update until 48 hours after my first post. I'm also only allowed to post one single update, so I'll try to fit as much as I can here. Sorry for how long it might end up getting. I'll just get right into it. On Saturday morning I woke up earlier than my husband. He was very hungover, so he was like sleeping a rock. But you guys will be proud of me, because I followed some advice and decided to look through his phone properly while he was sleeping. I have been on his phone so often just pissing around on it that I had never thought to check anything very deeply. I know his passcode by heart. I checked all the expected things like Instagram DMs, Facebook Messenger, his iMessages, etc., and I didn't find anything that set off alarm bells to me. But I know from some comments that people who are cheating are good at covering their tracks and hiding messages, so I kept looking around. I saw he had a folder called Work, and so I looked in there, and he had a couple of Microsoft apps, Outlook, Authenticator, OneNote, etc., but he also had MS Teams. So I opened that up and had a look around. It did feel like I might have been breaking laws looking at his work messages, but I obviously had too. Anyway, I was already upset to see that he had a bunch of one-on-one chats with several female coworkers. Which, at first glance, is obviously not an issue, because everyone works with people of the opposite gender and are required to communicate with them. But a couple of them were vaguely flirty, nothing I would call egregious, but there would be the occasional message between them with some playful innuendo or a wink emoji. The say upset me, obviously, and they did send me into a bit of a spiral, but I didn't find anything that suggested he was having an out-and-out affair with any of them. Still, I followed someone's suggestion of screenshotting the messages and I airdropped them to myself. I still wanted some evidence of the lie, though, some proof of Josh telling someone that I was his sister directly. A commenter suggested that I go through his messages and search for keyword sister. I wanted to reply to your comment and say thank you for the idea, but the post was locked, so I couldn't, but thank you. So I searched for sis on his MS Teams, hoping to find results for both sister and sis. A bunch of messages from all hands group chats or one-on-one chats came up from other people, all unrelated and about their own sisters or whatever. But my heart dropped out my ass, lol, when I saw there was a direct message from Jake, the guy from the bar, to Josh from a Monday a few months ago. Jake's messages said, ran into your sis at the bar on Friday, she's single, right? And my husband had the fucking gall to reply, nah, she's married. I literally almost burst into flames on the spot when I saw that. I can't even describe how much I was shaking after reading those messages. Firstly, that I could have confronted Josh about this months ago. I was, and still am, so furious with myself for that. Josh would have been fucking praying I didn't remember meeting Jake or that I wouldn't mention it, and he would have been counting his lucky stars that I never did. He probably thought he was hot shit for getting away with that, and I nearly burnt a hole through the floor thinking about it, lol. But secondly, I was just in shock that he had the balls to tell this guy that I'm the one who is married, because he doesn't want anyone having it on with me, but he is allowed to coyly flirt with every fucking woman in the office? Anyway, I kept going back through the search results on his MS Teams, and eventually I got as far back as 2-ish years ago, and I did in fact find a message from Josh himself to a group chat. It said me and sis in Nusa Dua. I clicked on that and saw that he had sent it alongside a bunch of photos of him and I from our holiday to Bali. We went to Bali for our second anniversary. I thought he probably chose those photos because he's shirtless and had been working out, so he looked hot in all of them. I was in tears seeing all of this, obviously. I took screenshots of those too and airdropped all of the screenshots to myself. Needless to say, I was devastated, and still am, to see all of that. I am still struggling to even process it at all. But that all happened on Saturday morning, and I immediately took myself to my friend's house. I'll call her Sophie. I went to her place to cry it out and show her what I found, and she was extremely supportive and probably more furious than me, lol. At around 1:30 p.m. I got a phone call from Josh, and I hung it up immediately. He sent me a few messages along the lines of, "Where are you, baby? I'm ordering food, want some? Sad to not wake up next to you this morning. Guys, I have to reiterate how much I love this man, and how fucking heart-wrenching it was to see him still acting like nothing had gone wrong. It took so much willpower to not just pretend none of it had ever happened and go home to him. I know a lot of you will yell at me or accuse me of being terrified of confronting him about this, which is not true. Please have some empathy. It takes me time to process my emotions, and I wouldn't have even been able to form a sentence if I tried to confront him immediately after seeing those messages. I needed some time away with Sophie to recollect myself, and so I stayed the night at her place. She ordered us Chinese and she helped me plan how I would confront him. I got a bunch more texts and calls from him as the evening progressed, and I eventually put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Sunday morning, I woke up feeling more angry than sad, so I opened my phone and finally replied to his messages. Coming home now, need to talk. I kept it cryptic to make him squirm, to be honest. Because I was /am fraught with emotions, I can't remember the entire conversation word for word, but I'll try to replay it as best I can. Long story short, I got home and he tried to hug me, but I refused him and we just stood in the kitchen. I did confront him like someone suggested. I just said, "Why have you been telling your coworkers I'm your sister?" I wish it would have been like a movie scene where the color drained from his face, or he immediately looked like a deer in headlights, but he didn't. It was like he had been girding himself for this confrontation for a while, because he just frowned at me and looked flabbergasted. He just said, "Huh?" This made me so angry. How are you going to pretend to be stupid after 3 years of lying? I basically said, "Don't play fucking dumb. 2 of your coworkers have greeted me as your sister, and I have proof of you telling them. And I know you're pretending to be single." Essentially, I asked him what he had to say for himself. He still played stupid. He became moderately defensive and just kept saying, "I don't know what you're talking about," or, "Why would I lie about you?" I cannot describe how furious I was at this point, but I was in tears. I always cry when I'm angry, so he was trying to comfort me as if I was having some kind of irrational breakdown. I showed him the screenshot of his message saying me and sis, and I said something like, "You tell me." He just said, "I don't know what I'm looking at, and I'm confused." I got so angry that I left again, and went back to Sophie's, because it felt like a dead-end road. I didn't think I was going to get him to admit to anything, and I was just getting so furious I couldn't continue. He was really upset, and in tears, which to me was evidence that he knew he was lying and that he was going to have to come up with some explanation. He tried to get me to stay, but I told him that until you have something to say for yourself, we've got nothing to talk about. At like 8:30ish, he called me again and I did pick up. He basically asked for us to talk and he said he has some things to say, so I went back to our apartment. He had written out a bunch of stuff on a piece of paper as if he had prepared a speech and sat me down on the couch. He asked me not to say anything while he was explaining himself. I'll write down the gist of what he said in bullet points. Anyway, I couldn't really think of anything to say at that point. He went to lock himself in the bathroom, and I just sat on the couch crying. I still don't know if I can trust what he said, and a lie that extreme is just baffling to me. If he can lie like that, for so long, what else could he be lying about? But his explanation and apologies seemed so sincere and genuine, and I guess to an extent what he said is believable. He has always been extroverted but very susceptible to peer pressure, especially from other blokes. If nothing else, to me, it's a sign of shocking immaturity. Anyway, I packed up a bag and went back to Sophie's, and I'm still at her place as I'm writing this. She said I can stay as long as I need to. I told Josh that I needed time away from him to think about everything and whether or not I believe him, or whether I can ever trust him again. He told me to take as long as I needed and that he will still be there if or when I get back, he said, even if it takes a year. Right now nothing feels real. I'm still dealing with the emotional whiplash from all of this and I can't keep food down or think about anything. I've taken the day off work and Josh told me he's going to take off the whole week. Sophie and my other friends have told me not to make a decision on anything until my head is clear. I spoke to my parents this morning and my mom says it's just a bump in the road, but she and my dad adore Josh so they're pretty biased, lol. That's where I am right now. I'll take some time before I consider my next steps. I can't say whether I'm leaning towards forgiveness or divorce, but those are really the only options. I kind of feel lost in a void at the moment. That's probably the best way to describe it, just emptiness. Now on to second story. Refused to sleep in the same bed with my husband due to his untreated severe sleep apnea, and now I'm considering divorce. My husband and I have been married for 3 years, been living together for 5. He has always snored and has gotten worse. He would wake me up 5 to 10 times a night. In 2020, he did a sleep study and was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea and prescribed a CPAP. He wore the CPAP for less than a week because it was uncomfortable. Throughout the years, I have spent hundreds of dollars on over-the-counter sleep meds and earplugs to try and sleep. I've tried calmly to speak to my husband over the years about this, but it has been met with, "You're just a light sleeper." I'm not talking about this / why are we talking about this? Married people should sleep in the same bed. I haven't always handled this the best. I've gotten very frustrated and yelled at him in the middle of the night. I'm working on putting my thoughts out calmly. Summer of 2022, I was pregnant and my therapist recommended strongly I sleep elsewhere. I was nervous, but I moved to our guest room across the hall. A few months ago, I moved to the basement because his snoring was still waking me up. This has provided better sleep but a horrible effect to my mental health. I have frequently encouraged him to go back to the doctor about his sleep apnea, possibly try another CPAP or explore other options. I'm also concerned on the effects of untreated sleep apnea on his physical and mental health. I tell him I want to sleep in the same bed as much as he does. I know many couples find success in separate bedrooms, but he has made it clear that he is not interested in that. Recently he mentioned, "I bet even if I fixed my snoring, you wouldn't sleep in the same bed as me." I was stunned. Me toughing it out for over 3 years shows the opposite, in my opinion. He finally offered to switch and let me sleep in our bed, and 3 days later he's complaining on how he can't do it. He keeps stringing me along about going to the doctor. I don't think he actually plans to go. His complete disregard for my sleep over the years is incredibly hurtful. His refusal to fix an easily fixable problem is mind-boggling. My question, should I give him an ultimatum to fix his sleep apnea or I'm out? I am considering divorce. Are ultimatums ever healthy? I need advice on how to deal with this. Update 1. Everyone's saying that he needs a CPAP, I agree. This is what I've told him for 5 years. Everyone that's saying he should try this. I guarantee you I've presented that as a solution for him. The Inspire implant, BiPAP, mouth guards, surgery etc. He insists that he will only try the CPAP. I've suggested different masks and he's reluctant, but he's tried 2 different ones. I do appreciate all your support and suggestions, though. I guess I made this post just venting. I don't really know why I made it. I sat down with him and I gave an ultimatum. I told him that he needs to treat his sleep apnea or I will divorce him. He didn't say much. We will see what he does with it. Update 2. For the past 5 years, my husband's sleep apnea has been a significant challenge in our marriage. Initially, I slept next to him, but his snoring made it difficult for me to get restful sleep. Despite trying different solutions like earplugs, my sleep continued to suffer. When I became pregnant, I reached a point where I couldn't handle the lack of sleep anymore. On my therapist's recommendation, I decided to move to the spare room across the hall, and we've been sleeping separately for the last 2 years. A year ago, his snoring became so loud that it started waking me up from across the hall, forcing me to move to the basement to get some rest. Unfortunately, sleeping in the basement took a toll on my mental health. After several conversations with him about my concerns, I expressed that I didn't want to sleep in the basement anymore and asked him to see a doctor for his sleep apnea. Instead, he started sleeping in the basement himself, which felt like a temporary fix rather than a long-term solution. The issue persists, especially when we travel, as our daughter and I end up sharing a room with him, and his snoring makes it difficult for us to sleep. I'm increasingly concerned about how this might affect our daughter's sleep as well. I recently sat down with him to express my concerns about his health and the impact this situation is having on our marriage. I shared that I was worried about the potential long-term consequences, both for him and for our relationship, because I have read studies that state that people die in their early 30s with untreated severe sleep apnea. In response, he made a comment that deeply upset me. He laughed and said, "At least I have 10 more years." Though I've tried to stay calm throughout this, I couldn't hold back my frustration in that moment. After I lost it, he did go to the doctor and got a new CPAP machine, but wearing it consistently has been a challenge for him. There have been various excuses about its discomfort, and despite his insistence that the CPAP is the only option, he hasn't been able to wear it through the night. We tried sleeping in the same bed again, but I found myself waking up multiple times to remind him to put the CPAP back on. After 2 weeks of disrupted sleep, I realized that he was taking the CPAP off as soon as I fell asleep, and I had to return to the basement. Lately, I've noticed through reports on the CPAP machine that he hasn't been wearing the CPAP at all, which has left me feeling incredibly frustrated and helpless. I feel like it's creating a huge wedge in our relationship and making me feel unattracted to him. This has been an ongoing issue for 5 years, and I'm struggling to see how I can continue living like this for another 5. I'm trying to stay calm and find the right words to express my feelings, but if we can't resolve this, I may need to consider other options for my own well-being. Update 3. I put down a retainer for an attorney, filled out the paper, and I will be officially filing for divorce next week. I finally came to the realization, thanks to almost 900 comments on that post, some wise advice from family and friends, and a lot of introspection, that he will never change. He has a severe lack of empathy for others. I have proof, through many texts, that I have told him his snoring has been impacting my sleep for years and he simply does not care. This is on top of him in the past secretly opening up a credit card, spending $1,000 on playing cards, and catching him talking to other women behind my back. I know it takes 2 for marriage to fail. So I am definitely reflecting on my own mistakes and contributions. My goal going forward is giving my daughter the most calm, stable, loving environment, which I've realized is impossible while in this marriage. If you have any advice on divorce, please give it to me straight. I've been reading up on r/divorce and consulting with my divorce attorney.